Good evening, dirtbags, and welcome to No One's Gonna Hear This Anyways. We're your hosts, Austin and Alex, and today we're gonna talk about a bunch of stuff you're not gonna hear anyways. And if you like hearing about absolutely nothing, like, share, subscribe to Not a Podcast. If you have any questions or requests, email us at notapodcast@gmail.com.
Or don't, because no one's going to hear this anyway.
So I have a question for you. Have you been watching The Last of Us?
I have not.
Dude.
I've managed to dodge The Last of Us. I've managed to dodge Game of Thrones and like a couple of other like really popular things. I just don't have a Netflix account.
Well, that's not Netflix, it's HBO, but I get it. That's just an extra.
Hmm.
An extra thing, but it's really good. Did you ever play the game?
No, because it seemed kind of like whiny with the little girl.
It really isn't. Yeah, I would not ever classify it as whiny. That's for sure. She's actually a really cool character.
Is
And
it intense?
she's not. Yeah, it's an intense game. It's an intense show. The show has really gone more on like it's dug deeper on the like human aspect of it, the humanity.
Mm-hmm.
um and I mean, I guess I don't really want to spoil anything for you, but just know that it's pretty depressing. Like, it's a heavy show, and it's scary, it's exciting, it makes you sad. There's funny parts in it too. Like, it is a very complete show, especially for like a zombie show at its
Right.
core. That's like at its most basic. If you were to give it a bad review, like, you would just say, yeah, it's a zombie show, like bad synopses, and that would be it, zombie show. But really, it's not like The Walking Dead in terms of like zombie show. Like, The Walking Dead's just a fucking zombie show.
Right.
This is way more than that, and I feel like they've done a really good job with making it more than that. Like, there's parts in that show you forget it's a zombie show.
So I do know the gist of it. Not I don't know any details. I don't know like any spoilers or whatever. But I know the girl is like the secret to making the vaccine, and um, initially the idea was they need to kill her to extract like the vaccine, and the guy taking care of her is like, nah, fuck that, and fucking pieces out, and that's kind of like what starts off the series.
That is not at all what starts off the series, my friend. You have got it ass backwards.
Oh, that's more recent then. Oh shit.
That is a colossal spoiler.
Yeah.
That because that's not at all how the show starts. He is simply hired to take her there. So it does
Oh.
start with her being immune. Like, that is this girl is immune to the fungus,
Okay.
because it's not a virus, it's not a flu, it's not bacteria, it is a fungus, and that's why everybody's sick. That's how everybody got sick. Um, but yeah, she's immune, and he gets hired along with this other girl to go and take her cross country to a team of doctors that are still around, still working, still sciencing, and they're gonna try and find a cure through her. Yeah, the him saying "fuck this" is that's how the show will probably. That's like how the story ends. There, is he says "fuck this" and takes her and leaves. Because throughout the whole journey, obviously he grows this bond with her.
Right.
But that's in the video game. So far, the show has been really good about changing certain things without taking out the heart of it. There's some minor details, some side characters who have different endings, different paths, different choices that they've made, and I've found a lot of those to be interesting. There's one that's upset some people, but I won't get into that. Um, but so far, the humanity part of it has been excellent. They have really made people feel while watching that. At least me. I know that it has made me feel, and my wife feel, while we're watching it, because it's like, damn, this is intense.
Damn.
But it's a ton of fun. I mean, if you know someone with an HBO account, like, see if you can fish it from them, because it is worth watching. And even so, from a science standpoint, you'll really appreciate the explanation of it and how it works, because it's a fungus that exists in real life. It's the cordyceps fungus. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Where it takes over essentially like a host, and it can control it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, that's a real thing. And the explanation they give is just realistic enough, just believable, just plausible enough that you kind of think, okay, well, yeah, I guess this could theoretically happen, I guess. And theoretically possible horror is possibly the most exciting for it.
Yeah, it's like the fucking worst, because then you're just like, you're in it. It's not, it's less disconnect from reality.
Yeah, so like, I've never been scared of paranormal shit, right? You know, like,
just about to go on that tangent. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you remember The Conjuring?
Yeah, The Ring.
Yeah, The Ring was funny. I really enjoyed The Ring. I thought it was an entertaining movie because it was kind of goofy. Like, the concept of it is about as hokey as it gets. Like, some demon child infecting a VHS tape that kills you in 7 days after calling you on the telephone. But like, The Conjuring was this massive hit too, you know, and I remembered seeing it in the theater because a friend of mine was like, "Yeah, this is the scariest thing ever. It's awesome. It's a great horror movie." And I remember thinking, it's like, okay, but it wasn't that scary. Like, sure, there's jump scares which naturally, you know, get a reaction from you. You know, even if you're not particularly tense, something jumps out at you, your natural reaction is to kind of jump back.
Right.
And for most people. But that's all it is. It's just kind of like cheap jump scares. While this, there's that underlying level of possibility that they carefully go through the lengths to explain at the very beginning. It's cold open to the show. It's, you know, this talk show in the 60s or 70s, around that area, like the Johnny Carson era. And it's two scientists talking about what they fear the most in terms of medicine, like plague, pandemic, what's going to wipe out humanity. And one of them says fungus, and then goes to explain it at length, to that like how it would be theoretically possible, because fungus can't, you know, survive in a certain temperature environment. And I think that's true for almost all fungus. Like, when you think about it, most fungus grow in cool, dark places. You know, like the old adage, you know, treat them like mushrooms, feed them shit, and keep them in the dark. That's why they're in a dark and cool and damp environment typically. And if not, they don't thrive, they don't survive. But what if the world was to get slightly warmer?
Like it is now.
Like it is now. And this was, you know, they made sure to put it, you know, like 60, 50 years ago, that it was kind of like, and it had this very creepy vibe to it too, like this, the vintage aspect of it, that they had this kind of foresight then, that they were thinking like, okay, well, maybe in the future, what if you know, global warming, and they probably didn't have a word for it then, was to happen, where all the temperatures in the world were increased anyways. Which I'm not sure if global warming would affect something like that to begin with, just because of the environment they're in. That is there that much of a drastic temperature change enough to that it would evolve into that? And also, how long would it take for it to evolve?
Yeah, I was just about to comment. Fungi are not the fastest at adapting. They're just, what the adaptations that they picked are incredible, which is why they're such simple organisms, but that really only exists at the surface level. Like, fungi are actually incredibly complex.
Absolutely. And they so I love watching the end portion of episodes when there's, you know, like an interview part where they're talking to the director or cast and reflecting on the show, And what's cool about this is that it's, an adaptation. So there's source material and new material. And where is the conflict? Where does it meet? And all this stuff. So they analyze the ways that they tried to make it more realistic. And one of them is where if you touch a part of the fungus, it's possible that through a network, you can reach some of these zombies and wake them up and they know where you are. And that's based on something real, that there's like a fungal network in forests,
Yes.
that it's not just this superficial mushroom that you see growing there like a plant that you planted a seed and there it is. It's part of something bigger. And that's where you said that like certain adaptations that it was selective about, and when progressing through evolution, is these spectacular evolutions, these spectacular manipulations that made them more survivable and more powerful, and powerful in in the sense of a mushroom.
So that prompted me to Google what the world's largest fungus was, and I remember it being taking up literally an entire park. And I just saw it right now. The Malheur National Forest. It's here in the United States. Location of the world's largest living organism. They call it the humongous fungus. And
Humongous fungus, I like it.
when you look at it, when you see its effectively its fruits, the mushrooms that come up out of the ground, they're sporadic, just like regular mushrooms. They pick where they want to grow because it needs the right conditions. But the way they found out that it covers the entire forest, they dug underground, and it has effectively roots running all through the ground. Tapping into trees. It's vampiric in nature. It'll take nutrients from trees that it taps into. But
yeah, it's parasitic.
Parasitic.
But I like vampiric. I like it, especially on the topic. That's a good word for it.
Well, that's the description. It literally sucks out the sap and the phloem, the water out of it. So it's not just taking an end product. It's literally taking its nutrients out. So vampiric is an accurate description. So yeah, no, that thing is fucking scary. And the whole like tapping into you and knowing where you are is indicative of a central nervous system. There's some stimulation with regards to a location that the nervous system can quantify in some way, usually an electrical impulse. And it's basically a beacon, like fucking another hand touches the beacon kind of shit.
Yeah, that bitch. Yeah, and so that they really they built on that. They only really did it in one episode so far that I've seen, where it has to do with this fungal network of reaching, and like it triggers that sensory and relays that information to a separate part of it. And I wouldn't know how that would really work once it passes from the root system. There would have to be, I guess, some kind of chemical communication with it, because not all, like the zombies aren't attached to the ground. So how is this information being sent through? You know what I mean?
It could be a lot like how bees communicate through pheromones.
Yeah, and so that's where I was saying is that it'd have to be something at a chemical level.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more. Going back to realism, like that sounds realistic.
Yeah, they're really they tried they tried to make it realistic, and I like the attention to those kinds of details. So if they were to build on that, it'd be interesting. But they haven't, and they might not, because I mean, it's a zombie show. They've done a decent bit of world building and effort into making it realistic already in the build up kind of part of it. Maybe towards the end they'll explain deeper on that communication level. But I find it fascinating. I think they've done a really good job with that. And The game had a I would say somewhat different approach to it. It was less realistic, but at the same time, they did a similar kind of research and scientific approach to it, where there would be like spore concentrations. So like if you were going to go into a building or underground where you knew that there were going to be zombies, these this fungus zombie that after a certain evolutionary point in the life cycle of the zombie, they would kind of be turned more into a fungus than resembling a human being, where their head gets kind of like overwhelmed and turns into this like fungus looking flower where they don't have any eyes. They just kind of click and try to use like echolocation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be exceptionally quiet around them. And in the game, you'd have to wear a gas mask. So like your character would just put on a gas mask if they were going in there, so they weren't breathing in the spores. And they changed that kind of completely in the show, where there's absolutely no spores. They even said it. It's like, it feels a little bit less realistic and less believable or it'd be more difficult for the story to even happen if it's constantly like, oh god, I got to put this gas mask on, or there's going to be spores, because spores travel pretty far. So why wouldn't they just be in the air anyways that you're breathing? Like if there's enough zombies in an open air area, there would still be enough spores to make you sick.
Yeah.
Which like reminds me, you remember they put these trees in the Everglades to try and dry it out. This was
No, I haven't heard of that.
Decades ago, obviously, before they really realized the ramifications. Let's see. I'm gonna look this up real quick. Melaleucas.
Okay.
So they're these they're the trees that have the big what's it called? These root systems, and they grow really tall and skinny, but they use up a ton of water. And their roots go super deep, so they're really hard to get rid of. And if you burn them, they release spores into the air that, spread their seed everywhere. So it's even worse to try and burn them down. And so it's an invasive species. And so the point of that is you would see them spread all over.
Mm-hmm.
And in certain areas, if you're driving, like along the Everglades, you can see like these long stretches of the Melaleucas. Yeah, and they grow like 3 to 6 feet per year.
That's crazy.
Which is
that's
so
fast.
Very fast growing.
Probably the reason they use up so much water.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have been a scientist in the 60s. I feel like that would have been so easy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Consequences.
You got a humidity problem? Here's some trees that literally pull water from everything.
Yeah, you don't want any more mosquitoes, so you can build, houses on this this swamp, this river here. You want to get rid of this river? I got you, man. Here's a tree that'll do that really easily. But you can't backtrack because it's just gonna keep growing.
Mm-hmm.
And then people were okay with it. They just said, "All right, bet how much you want. Where can I get them?" And that was it. That was their big solution to the Everglades, which isn't really a problem.
Right? Because who lives out there?
Yeah, man. Being a scientist in a time that was ignorant yet thinking it was progressive would have been the top time to make money. It's like the point where everybody's now starting to be like, oh, scientists, yeah, they know everything. I believe scientists. And it probably contributed to the distrust of scientists now when you think about it. Like, yeah, the cigarettes, they're good for you.
LOL, yeah. We learned that one.
Did I research it? No, but I'm a doctor. Like, trust me, I got a PhD or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, just smoke these Camels, man. That'll take care of that blood in your cough. It'll cure your tuberculosis right up. let's put some trees in the Everglades to dry it up so there's less mosquitoes.
Oh, cigarettes can kill. I'm still alive.
Yeah, I'm still here. Look at me. And
And
so now there's this distrust of scientists with global climate change, and you know, if you believe it or not, like there's certain things that'll tell you the climate is definitely different, and that's why I appreciate the global climate change as opposed to like global warming. You know, when you look at the science behind it, if you trust science, which is technically factually based, then you'd realize that.
right, and
But
the actual debate behind global warming or climate change and all that is not at the fundamental level. Like, I don't understand why people have a hard time believing it. Like, it's happening. It's just like, what are we gonna do about it? Is supposed to be the debate.
mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of solutions. It's just the people who can do it aren't gonna listen.
No, they want to make money.
Right, they want to make money.
Climate change, for the better, not profitable. If they find a way to make it profitable, absolutely.
Right, and that's why there's kind of a push to green energy and carbon recycling technology. Literally pull carbon out of the air and turn it into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the magic bullet right there. That's the golden gun. If you can extract carbon out of the air and do something with it, that's it. We're done.
Yep, we're solved.
But the problem is, the world's largest contributor to greenhouse gases is China.
Yeah.
And do you think they give a fuck? No.
Not really. There was a place in China that was trying to reverse some of their carbon footprint. Like they were trying to do some good, and the national Chinese government
Pulled the plug.
Well, they were, I don't know if they pulled the plug, but they were they were outspoken against it. I'm not sure where I saw this. Speaking of though, where I get my news from, for the most part, if I'm gonna see any news, is an Instagram account called Ground News. Have you ever heard of them?
Never.
They are about as neutral as it gets, and they have like a blind spot, as they call it, it's like a blind spot detector or something like that, or meter, where it'll show what news outlets, like left-leaning, right-leaning, central, and where, like, what their headlines look like, or if they're even making headlines for it, the percentage of coverage. So it'll have the news outlets and the percentage of left, or percentage of all news media is left and showing it, central showing it, or right showing it. So, you know, there'll be something where it'll be like left leaning is 50%, central is 31%, and then right leaning is 19%. And then you'll have, you know, the converse of it.
Oh, I've seen those meters before. Maybe it's probably something that's like widely practiced as a just what's it called, as a litmus test for reporting. But I know what you're talking about. Maybe just not from that news center.
I'm trying to see if I can find this. Keep going. Sorry.
I get kind of confused when news gets politicized, because what's political about what you're talking about? You know, if you want to be true neutral, just state a fact. Just say, you know, if Joe Biden was in Argentina or something, you know, you look at the camera and you just go, Joe Biden was in Argentina. Like that.
Yeah, and you say why he's there.
Right, and he's there
factual.
on whatever. Yeah, on whatever peace mission. Period. Like, it's not a peace mission for a new bill in the Senate because, or some, like, spinning it for one way or another. No. He's just there.
Yeah.
Like, what's so difficult to understand about this?
And so it's all sensationalism. You know, people, media outlets will do whatever it takes to get their demographic happy and coming back
Mm-hmm.
and clicking. The concept of clicks is the driving factor. How can I get more interaction with my content to boost my views, my monetization ability?
Yes.
What can bring us more money, and what can steer in terms of my views? How can I stir, or what's the word I'm looking for? I guess stir the pot, but how can I make this narrative appeal to the people I know are already watching and will bring people to watch it or click on it?
Mm-hmm.
You know. So that's another thing on Ground News is they'll show what the different media outlets have for the headlines, which I find is fascinating because you'll see it. You'll see that they're using these hotkeys, these buzzwords that'll make someone angry, make someone happy, make someone feel a certain way. And that's where it's really fascinating. I'm gonna send you just the link to that account.
Okay.
And it's Ground News. There, I just sent it, and you can take a look at that whenever you get the chance. It's worth it. I follow them just because I can't watch the news. I can't watch the news. I can't trust anything that just pops up. I just want facts, and that's it. I don't want your opinion. I don't care what your opinion is. I want to know what's happening.
Right.
And I want to know all of it. I don't want to know just one part of it. I don't want to know just this, select little cherry-picked bits of facts that are convenient to your narrative or to the narrative of the people who will be watching you. I just want to know what's happening.
Yes, the people who should be forming the opinions to share are supposed to be scientists or someone who's researched the matter extensively. And you know what branch of science lets you comment on current events? Political science. That's exactly what they're built for. But you know who comments on what's going on in the world? Journalists, who are supposed to be the arbiters of neutrality and the dissemination of information. But look at how far that's got us.
No, absolutely. It's all just subjective reporting. And they'll claim it's not, but if it weren't, we'd have all the facts.
Right.
I wish I could find this. I can't find this, that there was this municipality or state. I'm not exactly sure how China is broken up. How we're states, because we're a republic. That it was trying to shut down certain
provinces, that's
factories, provinces.
Yeah,
that it's trying to shut down these factories or mines or something because the air quality was so terrible there. And so they were trying to be, way better about it. They were trying to just make the area more livable, more tenable. And the Chinese government was kind of like, yeah, why are you doing this? It's not good. We need you to keep producing. We need you to keep working. But I won't say any more on it until I find it, because I don't want to just talk out my ass. Because if I do, then I'm just as bad as the reporters.
Right.
But back to what we were going with the Last of Us. What I really wanted to go to was the pandemic that we just came out of.
Oh yeah, we're toast if something like The Last of Us happens. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so we handled that about as poorly as you possibly could, and we made it out. Sure, there was a lot of death, there was a lot of uncertainty, stress, the impact on the economy, but we made it out, and here we are, back to kind of just a normal life. And I heard something earlier and I think it was Joe Rogan talking to Tom Segura about it, how we would come out of this, and this was like a pre-pandemic conversation or during pandemic conversation about appreciation afterwards of like how good we have it,
Right.
right? Where I can just go to the grocery store and there's toilet paper and there's not a massive line. I can just buy whatever food. Like it's all there. I can go out and socialize. My wife and I, we just we got off a flight today and we had been in Miami for the whole week and we went to restaurants, we went to the beach, we went to this giant wedding with 200 and something people in it. And no one seemed worried. No one was worried. No one was even thinking about it. It's like the pandemic never even happened. And he said something interesting that it's like, how long do you think before the gratitude will fade? And he's like, 7 days. That's it. Because we just forget. As human beings, we get comfortable so fast. And we're the most like that out of almost any other species of creature, any other living organism. We get comfortable very quickly. And that has to do with, I think, our adaptability.
That and the subconscious understanding that we're already at the top of the food chain. The only real threat to humanity is microscopic.
Or humanity.
Or humanity itself, yeah. But I mean, barring any like in a utopian sense, like where we aren't a threat to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that really, the only thing that's hunting us isn't even really hunting, but it's viral. It's like you said, microscopic. It's at the almost atomic level.
Yes, and it's doing what it needs to do to survive, and just because it's parasitic in nature is really the only issue. Because if it could produce its own, if viruses could produce produce their own energy and metabolize all on their own, we'd be fine. Like they wouldn't be a threat. That's the threat. Look at HIV. Back in the 60s when it first started coming up, it was actually tameable. They just didn't have the technology to like once and for all shut it down like we do today, which is what ended up happening. They started coming up with medication to curtail it, and it adapted. It realized, oh shit, I'm not surviving. The ones that did survive are the ones that made new copies. So guess what? Now you got a new generation that's resistant to whatever you're giving it.
Natural selection.
Yeah.
On a cellular level.
And viruses are the best at it. They evolve extremely rapidly because they're literally made of genetic material. That's their insides. And so when you have zero buffer between you and the material that codes you, you can change very rapidly. And for the most part, their life cycle is incredibly fast. They reproduce. You go from 1 to 100 million in a matter of hours.
And a virus isn't technically a living organism, right?
It is not.
Which is even, that's even more fascinating to me.
Because it lacks a metabolism. Like I was saying, it doesn't produce its own, what's it called? I guess, yeah, energy. It doesn't produce its own energy. It must pull sources of energy from its host. It infects other cells. It doesn't reproduce on its own. It infects the other cells, injects its genetic material into our own, and that's how it reproduces. We literally make more of it rent-free.
Yeah.
So yeah, and going back to The Last of Us, yeah, fungus is crazy, but have you thought about virus? Like, that's even spookier.
Yeah, and see, they talk about that in that cold open, that the virus doesn't really scare them because you can find a cure for a virus, right? So like when you look at HIV, like you were just talking about, there's not necessarily a cure per se. Like it's not just like you take this pill for X amount of days and then you'll never have HIV again. You go into remission and you can relapse.
Right.
But it's like viral load goes to undetectable levels, and that's where it's non-transmittable anymore. And like on that like a blood test, or I would assume.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to find the solution to it. And even like with the coronavirus, they made vaccines for it. And you make vaccines for the flu, and it's not an 100% solution because viruses evolve so rapidly. Every year there's a different strain of the flu, and that's why you don't take the same flu shot twice. Because it's always different. And it's that natural selection that the few that get through will reproduce, and they'll be missing whatever it is that the vaccine was able to stop. But with fungus, there's no cure.
Right. There's only for the most part, the way you take care of fungus is to make its environment inhospitable.
And yeah, exactly. So what I've always thought is like, well, what I've been thinking with the show is that since the temperature of the world went up, its ability to survive in hotter environments goes up.
Yes.
But how does the human body kill things that aren't supposed to be there?
By making it hot.
By making it hot. You get a fever, and you can run. The human beings run 106-degree fevers, which is this astronomical number percentage-wise versus what your baseline is. Like the average human being runs at like 98.6, I think, is that.
Yes, and it's also going down, fun fact. The average now is closer to 98.2.
Well, then we're fucked, buddy.
Yeah.
It's going down. The world's getting warmer. We're getting cooler. Yeah, perfect storm. I think they did. I think they're putting this out at the perfect time. But that's how human beings kill things. So I would think that would be like a flaw, a hole in this plot that they've curated this, idea that it's going to be that the world is hotter. Fungus can survive, but yes, they can survive in maybe 98.6, but what about 99? What about 100? And so on until, the upper limits of the human body and the human brain to withstand temperature. Because, human beings, if they have a certain temperature, their brain goes into overload and you seize and you can die.
Yeah, that's about 108.
And so about 108. Can a fungus survive at 107, 106? Would it be able to survive at that point? And why wouldn't the human body do that? Like, why wouldn't it go into this fever state and kill it? And I know it's just a fucking show, you know what I mean? Like you're not supposed to look at it this way, but what do? We're a couple nerds, so we're gonna look into it and we're gonna talk about this kind of shit.
So here's a question: why are we not trying to, disregarding any morality behind this idea? Why are we not trying to selectively breed with people who can support higher temperatures for a fever? Why?
Oh, like in current times?
Yeah, like why are we not looking into testing the limits of fevers? Find people that can survive 108. Have them reproduce or whatever. Now we have a sustainable population that can survive 108. Then we start looking for people at 108.5. Some sort of tangible increment. I don't know what it would be for just the therapeutic index. I don't know what it is for temperature.
Yeah, well, now you're getting into eugenics, which is pretty controversial.
Right.
And we're not doing it strictly because of the ethics.
Yeah.
And like that just goes to, like every person that was trying to do eugenics was typically an evil person, and they were doing it with the wrong end in mind, to exterminate a population of people or a certain culture that opposes them. And while I think that there's still that ethical complexity in terms of breeding and like for human progress at the survivability approach. So like what you're saying, to breed people who are more resilient to this versus that, or can have a higher temperature, or has this certain musculature and this genetic predisposition to be this. But then you look at Hitler and he was doing, like blonde and blue eyes. It's like, you fucking moron. Like, what are you wasting your time with this? Like, you could at least like try to do something that would actually benefit people instead of exterminating human beings. And I think that at just a breeding instead of killing part, I think it's more possible. Like, you can have smart people pairing with other smart people to create an even smarter person. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We're about halfway through our show, and that means it's time to remind you, if you like what you're not hearing, like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on absolutely nothing important.
Or don't, because no one's going to hear this anyway.
Like, have you ever seen Idiocracy? This
Yes.
might seem like a pivot. So you remember the introduction to that movie?
Vaguely.
So the introduction goes that like the way that human beings are breeding, like, and they used particularly like specifically America, how America is breeding, that you would have this smart, well-to-do couple who were scientists and like MIT graduates or something like that. They intelligent people, high IQ individuals.
Yeah.
And how they'll be saying, like, well, this time isn't right for us because we're really focused on our career and our studies, and we want to do this and that, and we're doing this, and they end up not having any kids. That's the end of their storyline. Is the husband dies, like he was trying to like jerk off or something, and choked himself to death or had a stroke, and then there's the dumb inbred, like white trash family who's breeding like rabbits, and this dude is spreading his seed to like 6 different women, and they have like 6 different kids each. And so it's spreading this plague of stupidity, while the smart individuals didn't have any kids and they didn't reproduce.
Yeah,
and
okay, now I remember.
That's definitely grounded in realism, because you'll look and some of these dumbasses, they'll have like 20 fucking kids, right? And then
Yes.
How many kids did your parents have?
Me, and then I'm pretty sure my sister was an accident, but I'm not going to go there.
Well, accident aside, they still had her.
Right.
All right. My dad had just me. My mom had me and my older sister. And that's it. So that's, we're 2 and 2 right there. And then you've got, Cleavon at the trailer park, who's got 20 kids.
Right. My peepaw before me he was one of 12, like that kind of shit. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. And so there's those people. And so back in the day, people had a lot of kids because A, there was way less survivability, and B, because they needed all hands on deck to run the damn farm.
Yes.
Now we don't need that. And so these stupid people, they just don't believe in contraception. We don't have any kind of sex ed in this country that's worth a shit, that teaches kids to, have safe sex appropriately instead of just, hey, don't have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it. Abstinence. Like, sure, abstinence is the only 100% way to not get a girl pregnant or get STDs, but
what do you think happens to kids when you tell them not to do something?
Yeah, like 100% of kids are gonna want to try to have sex. They don't give a fuck about abstinence, man. Like, eventually you are going to.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're one of these freak anomalies that it's, like the 40-year-old virgin, where it just never materialized. Like, I find that so difficult, so difficult to believe. But the point is, there's no actual formal education on it. There is just don't do it, and then yeah, there's condoms that you could wear, but just don't do it, you know. And then they
Yeah,
end up
there's
having a kid at 17, and then there's like, oh well, why stop now?
that's
Swing for
actually
the fences.
that's a huge problem here in the Midwest because abstinence education was the primary. Everybody in the dating market for me in the late 20s, early to mid 30s, they're all like single moms who have like a 14-year-old. They had a kid. That means they had a kid at like 16, 17, like you said.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I briefly dated I think she was 35, and she had a 16-year-old daughter. It's like, damn, your daughter's like
Like,
only like not even 10 years younger than me. Like, and I'm supposed to have, and I'm having sex with you now. Like, we're kind of dating, and that's just weird.
mm-hmm.
That is a weird thing, and that's North Carolina is pretty similar in that aspect, where I remember going to sex ed and they were just preaching abstinence the whole time. That's like, I don't want to do that. Thankfully, my dad was like, hey, if you ever need condoms, just let me know. I'll go get them for you and wear them. I don't want to hear no shit about you getting a girl pregnant. And I didn't. I was good. I was in the clear. He taught me that, but the system did not.
Yeah.
And that leads to, us having more dumbasses than smart people, but I feel like that's always been a problem anyways.
Degeneracy always makes a break for it. There's the universe prefers chaos. And order takes energy. So breaking that down, what's easier? If you want to fuck, you just fuck. You just let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
What's hard? Stopping yourself to put on the condom. Just to kind of put apples to apples.
Yeah. Well, what's more difficult, raising a kid or putting a rubber on?
Fun fact: we don't develop our was it fucking cortex? Frontal cortex? No. Anyway, there's a part of our frontal lobe that doesn't develop until we're in our mid-20s, and it's responsible for our ability to interpret consequences. Which is why a lot of people sound like they start acting different around their like late 20s. They feel more adult at that point. And that's why there's such a vast difference between early 20s and late 20s. It's really versus something like early teens and late teens, like the variance is much bigger for the 20-year-old range. And that range only gets tighter as you get older. The difference between a 31 and a 39-year-old is much less massive than 21 and 29, and then 11 and 19. And then as you go higher, like, what's the difference between a 71-year-old and a 79-year-old? They're both old fucks at that point.
Yeah. Their body is just deteriorating.
Yeah, and they've learned everything that they can. They've developed this part of their brain for much longer than everybody else, and it's kind of peaked. Because then, let's push a 71 to 89. Now you're jumping 2 whole decades worth of, like, variance. And there's not a lot. There's really not a whole lot of difference. In terms of, like, mental maturity.
Yeah.
And
well, it certainly explains why I spent my early 20s just doing hard drugs and drinking myself stupid. I didn't really have a understanding of the consequences.
And I think that I think therefore I is hold up. Let me conjure that thought real quick. I had something, but it was gonna be stupid.
Oh man, I interrupted you.
You
Oh no.
fucked it up.
Yep, I fucked it up. That's my bad.
I was about to have an Ernie moment. Oof. The first, hold on. Let me get to a point in this where I can fucking stop. I'm getting bombarded by shit in this game. Let's see. What is that part of the brain called? Frontal lobe develops at 25. Prefrontal cortex. So it's literally the very front of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Development
it's the last part to fully develop.
Yep, the development and maturation of the prefrontal cortex occurs primarily during adolescence and is fully accomplished at age 25. The development of the prefrontal cortex is very important for complex behavioral performance, as this region of the brain helps accomplish executive brain functions.
Mm-hmm.
Your decision making. So I think our ancestors fucked up by allowing the youngest of our population to be able to breed before this part was fucking developed.
Yeah. Really make any kind of decision of consequence.
Yeah, and you have you heard they want to bring the voting age down to 16?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I was still nutting into a sock at 16. Like, what the
fuck? Yeah. Oh man, I was picking my nose and eating the boogers at 16, you know what I'm saying? I was breathing through my mouth, dragging my feet, and just saying...
Dragging knuckles, dude.
Yeah, man. I was brain dead at 16. I don't remember a single important decision I had to make when I was that age. I don't remember a single important decision I had to make when I was fucking 20, you know? Like, you should not be allowed to make important decisions when you can't make important decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like think far back. All right, there were kings that were teenagers, emperors that were children.
And you know what happened to those fucking empires?
They crumbled.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part.
Or the what's it called? The advisors that were mature ended up making their ruler the puppet.
Yep. And then when things didn't go that way, they just, kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Hang them.
Yeah, because it's clearly the king's fault. He fucked up. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I couldn't make important decisions until I was already a grown ass man. And I still hate making important decisions. Like,
but that's the definition. Like, you're a grown ass man because you make decisions. It's not that you make it's not the other way around. It's not that you make. I'm seizing, bro.
I'm kind of picking up what you're putting down, though.
You're not a man. You're not making. Yeah, you're not making You're not making decisions because you're a man. You're a man because you're making complex decisions. Like, your ability to do that is the definition.
Ability to, yes. I agree. Like, sure, you can make an important decision when you're 16. Like,
is it going to be a good decision? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, you don't have the cognitive capability to make that decision as best as you would be able to once you're fully developed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your ability to process information and consequence, like what you were saying, is that fundamental difference from when it's developed and when it isn't, is your ability to digest and comprehend the concept of consequence, the true ramifications, because even a dog knows if you bite your owner, you're going to get hit if it happens enough times.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But that is classical conditioning. Almost anything can learn that way. Consequence and understanding it and why it's happening is a very different thing.
Right.
It's not as simple as I bit him and he's going to hit me. It's not as just like X equals Y. It's not the same thing. it's far more complex because it's like, why is this the result that happens? It's not just I did it and it gets hurt. It's that what you're doing is the incorrect thing to be doing.
There was a study, an experiment done. I'm sure you've heard of it. About they put a bunch of monkeys in an enclosure, put a ladder. Top of the ladder, there's a banana. They linked the banana with some sort of pressure mechanism. They tied it to a sprinkler or a water gun or something. They sprayed water on the monkeys when they touched the banana. That banana. And monkeys hate water. Aside from, consensually walking through it to get across a river or whatever, they hate water. They hate getting sprayed with water. And so over time, they learned not to touch the banana. They swapped one of the monkeys out with a brand new one that was not conditioned. That monkey went for the banana. You know what happened?
They stopped him.
The other monkeys fucking stopped him and beat him so that they wouldn't get sprayed.
Mm-hmm.
And now it kind of the argument evolves into something a little bit more complex. There is cause and effect. That's a very simple part to understand. But when you're getting penalized for something out of context, it becomes frustrating to understand. That monkey got frustrated at the end of it. Mm-hmm. Didn't know what was going on, wanted the banana.
Yeah, I want that fucking banana.
But
why don't you let me get the banana?
Now that the negative stimulus is from something relatable, i.e. its counterparts, there's frustration. And you can blame it on them being much more simple and less complex than us, but it does extend to humanity. We've been conditioned against certain stimuli, and I guess where I want to move the conversation is, does that give us a fundamental understanding of ethics and morality? Like, are these things bad because we've understood them to be bad, or are these things bad because we were just told?
Because you know that there's a consequence attached to it.
Because you know there's a consequence attached to it.
Mm-hmm. And for the other monkeys, the consequence is getting sprayed. For the new monkey, the consequence is getting his ass beat by his other monkeys.
Yep. Let's extend it back to these kids having rampant sex. They can understand cause and effect. You don't have to be a straight A student to know in your biology class that once an egg is fertilized, that's it. That's a pregnancy. It gets implanted, and you're gonna be a daddy, boy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something based in fact. That's the warning. Clearly, from this study, there was no communication. Like, if the monkeys had a way to tell the new guy, hey, don't touch the banana because this happens, the frustration would go. And
there would be a fundamental understanding.
But we can't regress information based off of a more complex structure. So, like, we can't assume backwards, basically. We can't assume that it would function at the monkey level by giving the kids the information about the consequences of pregnancy. Where was I going to go with that one?
There's more critical thinking, though, in a kid than a monkey.
And that's what I'm trying to say.
There's that communication ability where they can tell the other kids, like, hey, don't do that or you'll get her pregnant.
Right. But in our case, being complex creatures, we can think beyond a statement. We can critically assess information.
Mm-hmm.
But because this prefrontal cortex isn't developed, we can't have conclusions, or at least accurate ones, at such a young age. So yes, they have the capacity to understand that having sex without protection will lead to, or could lead to, pregnancy. But in the moment, or at any tangible point in that time, they don't comprehend the effects of the pregnancy. Like, you could beat it into a kid for 4 years of high school that, this is what's going to happen. But they're not going to know until they get a bitch pregnant, and then that pregnancy happens, and now the kid is born, and they're learning as they go. Those people tend to be a lot more mature real quick because of something that happens through pregnancy. There's something that happens at the neurological level for both the mom and the dad that really speeds up the maturity.
You're also feeling the consequences more than just like it's now tangible.
You're
the consequence
experiencing
is tangible. It's not theoretical.
Yes.
It's not, this is possibly what could happen, because you're not thinking about that.
Where
they don't understand it.
Yeah, that prefrontal cortex is the critical point. And I guess you can what's it called? My SAT vocab gets shredded as the night goes on. Like, my vocabulary thins.
Night goes on. It's only 7 p.m. your time.
I know. There's a word for it. I'll get back to it. So by the time you turn 25, I'm sorry. There we go. That's why pregnancies and relationships that end in pregnancy are much lower once you're in your mid to late 20s. Notwithstanding shit like you're in your career, notwithstanding shit like you just moved and you've done something new, or family issues, grandparents moving on and things like that. Just at that surface level, it's much smaller, given the same circumstances. They're still in podunk nowhere, ain't shit to do. They're on Medicare, Medicaid, cashing in what they got left. The same thing they had to do at 16 is fuck.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. They at that point they'd be able to put two and two together. And
well, I don't know how accurate that one is, because those people fuck like rabbits.
Yeah, they keep fucking going.
They get more government
money.
assistance.
Yeah,
yep.
that is true.
So that's an understanding of consequence too. It's like, hey, if I have this kid, that means I get more money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true.
But then you still have that lurking variable of mind-altering substance. And so when you look at alcoholism and drug addiction, lower incomes have a far higher penchant for it. And maybe it's because they didn't know any better and they started doing it early, and it stunted their mental growth. And I think that has, part of it to do with it. There's cultural, there's a lot of different things that will affect growth outside of just that baseline cortex development. Because there's that lurking variable of drugs and alcohol that will affect your brain chemistry. So take me, for example. I was, a drug addict for many years. Mm-hmm. And I essentially started at 16. And a running theory / joke, it's kind of hackneyed in the recovery community, is that you stop growing mentally and emotionally the day you start you become an addict. And that could be the first time you took a drink or a pill, or it could be the 100th time. That is when you stop mentally maturing. And I can see a lot of the viability of that, and not in necessarily a provable scientific way, like not in a tangible way, but like I was very immature for my age once I finally got my shit together. And I feel like I started maturing and growing at an exponential rate after that. And I got sober at 23 going on 24, I believe. Um because I hit 5 years sober this year. So I think I was 23. Maybe I was 22 going on 23. I don't really remember. But I'm 5 years sober in March.
Nice.
And the growth that I went through in just essentially the first like 3 months when the fog was lifting, I mean, my decision making ability was completely altered. I went from being unable to handle almost any kind of decision, like making it properly. There was always this this voice going the opposite direction. It was just everything was quick trigger and hot tempered decision making. There was no clarity, there was no true comprehension, there was no critical thinking involved. It was monkey brain, quick trigger decision. Like, you poke me and I'm going to hurt you, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that kind of stuff. It's just knee jerk survivalist decision making. And they were almost always the wrong decision. I mean, I would get into fights with people all the time just because it was just this quick pop off. And so when you apply that randomness, that almost like unreliable statistic of alcoholism in the lower income community, and this is just as the example that we're going off of from before where the dumbasses are breeding, is that they get even stupider. Instead of maturing, they stunt their growth and they keep making bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also got to be, you know, there's variance in the 25-year rule as well, I would imagine, where, you know, depending on environment, depending on upbringing, depending on education, like, I'm sure it all affects it. Like, if you don't have a good education, even if you reach 25 and you mature properly and your the prefrontal cortex is completely fully grown and functional, you will still not have the proper decision making needed in those situations. In theory.
Right. And I mean, that goes to show like just how dangerous fucking any little thing is to the future of humanity. Like, the fact that some spicy molecules can fuck us up so bad.
Oh yeah. And we encourage them for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we went to college together. Drinking was a huge part of it. Smoking weed was a huge part of it. You know, mind-altering substances were a huge part of the collegiate experience. You know, it's part of my high school experience. It's part of my young adulthood experience. And it's, you know, you turn on the TV and there's a Bud Light commercial selling you poison.
Yeah.
Because that's literally what alcohol is. It's poison. Just like mushrooms, like how they elicit that response is because your body is responding to the toxin in a certain way that makes you hallucinate. And that's, you know, your liver failing, and that's why you feel drunk.
Mm-hmm.
You know? You're poisoning yourself.
So do you think we opt for mind-altering substances to not so that we don't have to face these consequences that we're now aware of?
Oh, absolutely. I think that they have marketed, you know, a cold beer at the end of a workday as this big stress relief thing. And there is science that goes that backs up a theory of, you know, like one alcoholic beverage or something, like a glass of wine, a beer, a shot, or something, like a glass of whiskey at the end of a day or every day, like every evening, can help relax you and lower your blood pressure. but it's that overindulgence where you get sick and it starts negatively affecting your body,
Yeah, everything
right?
in moderation.
But so that it's all been marketed towards people to like, oh, you've had a rough week at work. Well, it's Miller time, baby. Like
Mm-hmm.
have a crush a 12 pack and black out and throw up on your couch. And that was always the market is this will relax you instead of encouraging healthy coping mechanisms of okay, this is stress, this is how I'm going to deal with that stress. This is stressing me out. Like, what can I do to remedy the situation and not be, an Advil when you have a cold? It's not medicine in that it's curing you. It is curing a symptom temporarily. It is alleviating symptoms.
Mm.
And so alcohol as that stress reducer it's alleviating a symptom of a greater problem. And the only cure is, taking it head on at the psychological level. Or even at the activity level. If there's a bunch of shit you've got to do and it's stressing you out, then do it. Finish it and be done with it.
Finish him.
Yeah, finish it. And that's I think it's a big problem, really. But yes, and that's the long form answer to your question is that people do drink or smoke weed or do drugs because they have likely something that is bothering them, something that is stressing them out, and they know that will take it away at least temporarily. It's a band-aid.
Right. The consensus is kind of like no one wants to deal with problems. But then the people who are the most successful are the ones that deal with problems. The people who are out there fixing shit.
I mean, if you have problems, you're not successful. Like, you're not succeeding. You want to take care of those problems. And when every problem you take care of is successful, you are succeeding by doing that, by overcoming that, as opposed to, drinking something. Because the problem's still there. You're not fixing the problem. You're making yourself forget about it briefly.
Yeah, planned ignorance is the...
Mm-hmm.
Or deliberate?
Deliberate ignorance. Intentional ignorance. Like, you are doing it on purpose because you are ill-equipped to handle the problem that is affecting you negatively. So, like, I drank because it's like, man, I've got all these problems, and I did drugs because it's like all these things are stressing me out and I can't cope with them. So my coping mechanism was forget about it for a little while. Only a little while turned into all the while, all the time.
A lot of while, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a natural trajectory for a lot of this, like if you're drinking because of something specific, then you have this propensity to do it in excess. Because for the most part, that problem is going to keep rearing its ugly head and you're going to keep thinking about it. And then the logical response is, let's keep drowning it and eventually it'll stop.
It becomes a vicious cycle and then you're all fucked.
Absolutely, because you render yourself useless and then the problems are worse the next morning. And then it's like, oh shit, well the problem's worse now, and then you render yourself useless again. It's a very vicious cycle that just keeps feeding itself. And I'm not saying everybody's like that, but that's problem drinking is a problem in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, obviously I don't do anything that alters my brain. So I have to deal with problems and process consequences as they come and handle them as best as I can. And there's no avoiding them. There's no thinking about something else. There is the problem. And now, how am I going to fix it? How am I going to make myself feel better? And if it's like an emotional problem, if you find something that you can enjoy that's positive, and that's a good way of coping, because now you're remembering good things in life and positive things, and that's at an emotional level. And then if it's, like financial, it's like, well, guess I'm going to work tomorrow. I'm going to work extra. I'm going to do this. I'm going to cut back on this.
Mm-hmm.
And, what doesn't help on a financial problem is buying alcohol or buying drugs, because now you're contributing to that problem by spending the money you need for other things. You're just not thinking about it while you're doing it.
Man, this shit gets real spooky.
What?
Like how all these decisions can literally just knock out a whole person out of productivity for the rest of humanity, like towards the rest of humanity, like just knock someone out of commission.
Absolutely. I mean, the opioid, it's pretty much a pandemic. Is the pandemic no one's talking about, or people are trying to, but there's no real solution to it, is opiates. And as a firefighter, as a first responder, I see this every day, is overdoses. And we'll have regulars overdose. And as a recovered drug addict, like, man, what the fuck, just stop doing it. And it's it's obviously not that simple, but for me, as someone who's found the solution and been able to live in it, it is very frustrating. Mm-hmm. And these people will die. They either will quit and get better, or they will die young and alone. And they are just one less person that gets to have a life and gets to experience life and gets to contribute and gets to enjoy things, find a partner, have a kid, have a job that's rewarding, live in a house that they love, do things they enjoy, have hobbies. These people get robbed of it completely, and it's pretty much by themselves. Like, they rob themselves of it, but they no longer have that choice. I mean, I have a friend who passed away about a month ago, and he was 6 years sober and relapsed and died. So even someone who's found the solution, lived in it, and experienced what it's like to live a life free of chains of addiction, they still went back. So yeah, I guess it is spooky, because like, why is that? Why does that happen? Why can this happen? Why is this being allowed to happen? And we don't have an answer for it. It's heavy.
And you have like you mentioned about your friend, you have consequences happening to people who don't fucking deserve it sometimes.
I mean, he did it to himself. Once you've chased the dragon, it's hard to not want to chase it some more.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we are in this world right now, and it's crazy. And so you'll have a perfectly functional person like him who's now thinking straight, and then one moment he isn't, and then one moment he's dead. So, like, thinking back on brain development, how important is it really? Like, and at what point do those consequences, like, what point does your brain stop processing consequence again? Because there is a beginning and end to everything.
Yeah.
So there's a start to when your brain fully starts processing consequence, and there is an end to it. So when they stop fully comprehending it.
There's also the problem of not being aware of the consequence. So going back to the whole sex ed thing, if you don't tell anybody anything, but let's say it's a utopia and they don't have sex until they're 25, the prefrontal cortex is developed. You let them loose. They just kind of get the ability or whatever. Let's just give it as many controls as possible. You know, it's a perfect world. It's a perfect situation. Will this person still understand that what they're doing would even have a consequence? Now, it's not to say that a full grown-ass adult shouldn't know the consequences of drugs. Like, that's such...
He was a drug addict. He fucking knew.
Yeah, and not only that, it's very well rooted in our society to at least talk about it at some point in someone's life. I find it hard to believe that anybody in the United States has not gone through some sort of exposure to drugs.
Absolutely, especially in this day and age.
And you have, that might be one of the problems. It could just be that, you know, one-time overdose kind of thing, where, you know, you for all intents and purposes, you think you're doing a fine hit. You're doing
okay, yes, yeah. You think you're doing a safe hit that you've done a million times, but there's fentanyl in it.
Right. And now all of a sudden,
yeah. Yeah, you didn't know that there was a consequence there that was at a higher percentage rate than any other time that you've done it.
Yeah.
The lurking variable.
Right. At what point does it stop being decision making and become an extraneous circumstance?
Mm-hmm.
Where you just become a statistic.
Yep. No idea, man. Well, we have successfully, dived into some depressing shit, some interesting shit.
Yeah, this
has been a scientific episode, my friend. That's all the time we have for today's episode. If you like what you're not hearing, like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on absolutely nothing important, or don't.
Because no one's going to hear this anyway.